Hi, so I'm going to do a quick overview of relational design, and I'm going to go through the Google slides, but you should go through them yourself more carefully because I'm going to be fairly quick about them, and then I'll talk a little bit, show some examples of the relational design. So we'll start with the Google slides. I'm going to present. Okay, so we're talking about modeling databases, and there are some different elements that are here. There are entities, which we'll talk about a lot. Entities are things the database deals with. They are essentially tables, but in the design phase. In the design phase, they're called entities. When the database is actually created, they're called tables. Uh, in a point of sale database, for instance, there might be entities for customer, sale, inventory, employee, etc. And they, again, it says they become tables in the actual database. An attribute is something that describes an entity. So a customer attribute might have things such as customer number, last name, first name, email, phone, etc. Attributes are general descriptions, not specific. Like you wouldn't create an entity that has for George Wilson. You would only do one for customer. Attributes usually become the column headings in the tables or the fields. So every entity should have a primary key, and it's an attribute that uniquely describes an entity. Every customer number would be unique for each customer. You could also use an email or a phone as long as they're always unique. One of the things about a primary key is that it can't repeat ever in that table. You could have the same numbers, for instance, if you use numbers, repeat in another table, but they have to be unique in its own table, in its own entity. And every entity should have a primary key. So there's a few types of keys. I'm not going to worry about these. Natural key is where you make use of one of the attributes, such as an email or a phone. A surrogate key, which is what I will usually do, is where you just automatically assign a random number to the key. Usually just the numbers in sequence, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. A composite key is where you have more than one attribute combined to make a single key. There's never more than one key in an entity, but a key can consist of more than one attribute. These can be complicated, and I would avoid them. There are a couple of times when I use them, mostly in linking tables, which I'll show you when we get into the design more. So there's also candidate keys, which are just things that could have been a key, but you decided not to use them. Like if you did assign a number, the email could be a candidate key, even though you didn't use it. And in anything that is designated as unique is considered an alternate key. I'm never going to hold you to any of these, but I just wanted you to kind of know. The main thing about a primary key is that it uniquely identifies each row in a table or an entity. So here's it in the diagram. And ours will look a little different because these were made in Visio and we're using Lucid Charts, but the basic principles are the same. There's a box up here for the name of the entity. There's a place for the primary key. And then there are attributes. So these are all things that describe department. It's got a key, it's got a name, it's got an office number, it's got a phone. If it's in bold, it's theoretically required. If it's not in bold, it's not. I don't know if you can hear the cat crying, but try to ignore it. All right. Foreign keys are when you take a primary key from one table and put it in a second table to make a relationship. In the second table, it's called a foreign key, right? And there are three kinds of possible relationships between tables or entities. One-to-many, which is the most common type. 90% of all of your entities will have a one-to-many. One-to-one, which is legal but less common. Very much less common. You may never encounter one. One-to-one means that exactly one record in the table relates to exactly one record in the other table. Many-to-many is common, but it can't be resolved by the database. It has to be resolved by creating a linking entity that converts a many-to-many relationship into two one-to-many relationships. All right, so one-to-many means that for every one occurrence of an entity, there can be any number of related entities of another kind. For example, one department can have many employees. And then here's an entity diagram of that, right? So here's the department, and then the department key is down here as a foreign key. This is a crow's foot. This is a one side, and this is the many. There are lots of variations of these, but I don't care too much about whether it has a circle, it has two lines, or one line. Those are all things that have to do with cardinality, which I'm not going to worry about because the database. The main thing I'm going to worry about is that the one side points to the correct side, and the crow's foot, the 3, points to the correct side. One department, many employees. And the department key can repeat as many times as necessary over here, but here it has to be unique. All right. So here's an example of that. We have department key. Whoa, let me go back. Here we have department key is 1, and that's human resources. So down here we have Jennifer Lewis is in department 1. This links to this. Tells what department she's in. This stuff is only listed once, and then it's attached by this reference. And then apartment 2 has 2 people in it, so this 2 relates to these 2's here. Both Sam Taylor and Mary Nelson work in IT. Okay, so that's how the foreign keys work. These are foreign keys. These are primary keys. These are primary keys over here for the employee, and they could go relate to other tables. One-to-one relationships occur for each instance of an entity where there's exactly one related instance in another entity. And typically a one-to-one relationships have the same primary key. So if we create a login entity where each employee has their login information, there would be exactly one login for each employee. Not sure that's always true, but here it is going to be true. So employee key is the primary key in both of these, but it's also a foreign key over here. Primary key and foreign key, and in that. It's a one-to-one. Notice that there's 1 and 1. There's no crow's foot because it's just one record will match one record. This is a very rare kind of relationship, and you don't encounter it a lot. And then here's the data, the same primary key, and in the login has been hashed. Good. All right. Many-to-many. This is one of the more important parts. A many-to-many is where one record in an entity can hold, or table can be related to many positions, and one, just a second. Sorry if there's a bit of